Well, that's the sound of the new Arturia MiniFreak, which is the latest in the Freak range. Those of you who might wonder where this came from, you'll probably remember also the MicroFreak, which is this little guy here, which, despite its diminutive size and kind of digital heart, did really well and continues to sell incredibly well. I don't know whether it's in the top lists anywhere at the moment, but I know lots of people are very keen on this. The MiniFreak sort of doubles down on what we get. Well, at the heart of it, we've still got the same oscillator, which is the digital oscillator, which has a lot of algorithms with some open source stuff from the Mutable Instruments catalogue of algorithms. There's also some other algorithms in there, some Arturia algorithms, but we've got an analog filter. But essentially, we've got two of these oscillators. We've also got the addition of digital effects, and these effects are really quite tasty. They kind of remind me a little bit of the Polybrute vibe, you know, that kind of lush. I mean, there was quite a big reverb on there. I did turn the send down a little bit, but essentially three effects that work in that. The mod matrix has been extended as well. We've got actually, I think it's 3 extra rows, but the really interesting part is we've got the same 3 assignable, but if you see this legend here, there's page, so shift gives us 3 pages of 3. So instead of just the 3 assignable parameters, which if I bring the preset up, you assign that just by basically pressing and holding and then adjusting the knob that you want to be in that slot. We've actually got 3 pages, so we've got 9 of those, which gives us an awful lot more modulation possibilities. But we've also got this keybed, which is a little 3-octave aftertouch enabled keybed. Now, those of you who remember the MicroFreak will know that it has a capacitive touch, which is kind of interesting. So the more of your finger that goes on it, the more expression you can get. And that gives you this kind of MPE access, and that's not something that we get with this. Also, there was the CV outs, and there's a pressure out on this. So that's something that's missing. But I think there's the sum of the parts more than makes up for this. Other things that we've got, instead of the capacitive touch and the strip, we've got these 2 mod or keyboard wheels. They can be set into keyboard and bend macros, which are really cool. They can be assigned to a lot of parameters. If we press and shift, we should be able to see, if I bring the overlay up, we've got 4 lanes of macros which can be set up in positive and negative. And this greatly adds to the expression of this little instrument. Not only that, but we've got stereo output, MIDI in, out, through on full-size jacks, sustain input, audio input as well, clock in, out, and a reset. We've got an ARP and a sequencer mode with lots of different kind of settings on the front panel, step lengths, and whatnot. But before we get started, I just want to say thank you very much to GPU Audio for sponsoring this video. We will have a short message from them, and then we'll get straight into it. GPU Audio are bringing their patented next-generation technology to producers, musicians and sound designers, offering ultra-low latencies, continuous machine learning and vast scalability made possible by your computer's graphics card. They've just released the first part of their beta suite, a collection of free plugins which will be released in bundles. The modulation bundle is available now and features chorus, phaser and flanger, all running on the power of your GPU. They also have an SDK on the horizon, giving third-party developers the opportunity to explore and create the next generation of audio plugins and effects. Apple support is also in the works. Be the first to download the free modulation bundle by signing up at gpu.audio/sonicstate. This is a really interesting sound. Obviously, lots of reverb on this, but what I'm really discovering is the filter, the bandpass filter, has got a really nice characteristic. Lovely. I'm using distortion in this guy, and one of the effects, we've got a peak EQ, a reverb and a distortion at the front, and we can get there's some great distortion algorithms in here. Incidentally, these sounds, I haven't named them yet, but once the review's done, I'll be posting them on our Patreon, which you can get to, so you'll get patches from this. There's also loads of other exclusive video and ad-free versions of all our reviews, plus patches, samples, and Sonic Talk pre-show as well. So this one is running in paraphonic mode, and the thing about paraphonic mode, which I'll bring up now, it's really not paraphonic. I mean, it's actually, what you do is you go into paraphonic mode and then you're using just one oscillator per voice, but then you essentially get 12 voices, because as far as I can tell, you're still getting a filter per voice, you still seem to be getting an LFO per voice, and you're certainly getting an envelope per voice. So it's not really paraphonic, it's kind of just more polyphony, but obviously less oscillators. And that means you can just kind of just stomp on the sustain pedal and just literally have them all ring out. Right, okay, after that sonic interlude, let's get into some of the nitty-gritty. Okay, let's just go to a nit patch, which gives us what we might expect. Not really any issue with tuning or anything on these, obviously. So, we'll go to the oscillator types. We've got all the usual suspects in here, and the way that this tends to work is we've got through each type, and then these basically modify each of the sounds. And these actually, all of these knobs are routable via the mod matrix, which is kind of cool. You just press, so if we wanted to assign, we just press and hold, and then let's just modify shape. That's a sine. Let's make that into the LFO. Just go LFO and then set the amount. Nice and easy, really. We'll just take that down to 0. So then wave shapers. I mean, there's basically 20 of these guys in here.
Frequency.
All the usual favourites. Some of my favourites, actually, there's a modal, which is really lovely. So if I bring the... I love that kind of just interesting harmonic. Another favourite, obviously got a noise one. There's a couple of noise engineering ones in here, which I'm not sure if they were in the original, but I really like this. I like bringing that noise in. When you bring that up, the release up on that, take it up an octave, stick a bit of reverb, or even a lot of reverb on it. Bring the filter down a bit. Lovely atmosphere. Let's take that off. Saw X. Just, I mean, even though they're digital, they're really interesting. Harmony one is very nice as well. Just some really interesting kind of digital algorithms, and some of these obviously came from mutable instruments, as we know. You know, they are fantastic, even though we don't get any more from them now. Just absolutely fantastic. One of the superstars of DSP coding, in my humble opinion. Right, let's get back to... So there's also an audio in. We'll look at that a little bit later. We can just go to oscillator 2. Take that up a couple of octaves. I've gone a bit too far there. Take it out of fine tune mode. Let's go to one of my favourites, which is fifths. Just an absolute massive tonal palette. And yeah, I mean, some of you are probably not going to be that into maybe the digital stuff, but I have to say there's so many harmonics here. And then when we get into the filter I think is a lovely, it's actually just a really nice musical filter. So we'll just go back to a sawtooth, listen to that filter. nice resolution on this if I bring the overlay up. I really like the bandpass. Let's get a bit of release. One thing that's a really nice trick, if we put distortion, or bit crusher rather, on the bandpass, let's just... So we reduce the bit depth, or decimation, we get some really nice... Just love those harmonics. It almost turns into talking filter, real sort of like a Daft Punk kind of vibe. Just nice. There's no effects on that yet. Back to the filter. Let's just listen to the high pass as well. Just sort of fairly basic, but if we start to bring those harmonics up, yep, there they are. Sing song. If we go a bit lower, you can see we should, if we take the reverb off, we can pluck out those, go right down, those big harmonics as well on that low pass. Okay, now I think this is where we get on to the kind of superpower, or one of the superpowers of the Minifreak, because there are a ton more filters, but they're digital, and the way that you access them is actually something I've not seen before. This is a kind of unique approach. So I've got, again, my regular filter. I'll just leave that right open for now because we're not going to use it. But if we go to Oscillator 2, now Oscillator 1 and 2 are essentially very similar, apart from they have slightly different algorithms available. But one of the things that Oscillator 2 has, if we go here, as well as the chords engine, is as we get further down, we get into... There's an FM and AM modulation, but there's also this thing called multi-filter. Now, this is really interesting because multi-filter here, we change the mode with the shape filter. So we go low past 36 dB, we bring the resonance up. It's a kind of slightly dirtier, angrier filter, a bit more like the Steiner Parker in some ways. But then we got these other shapes: low pass 12, low pass 6, high pass 6, high pass 12, band pass, and then notch filters, which create that sort of interesting, almost sort of phasey kind of sound. Again, very easy. Just assign that to wave 2. Let's put that on oscillate on LFO 1. Bring that up. But it doesn't stop there. If we go to another type, there's also a surgeon filter, which has, again, these filter types. But the really cool one, I think, is the comb filter. Now this is absolutely, if I just... So if I take that out, actually, let's just bring the level of this down, and then just really interesting. And then bear in mind, we can, let's put that, a bit of reverb on that. We then can feed the output of that into an additional filter, which is the analog filter. There's also a phaser filter and this destruction, which is kind of like a wave folder, which has, again, very interesting. And if we go back to Oscillator 1 and change the kind of waveform that we're putting into it, massively different sound of what's coming out. So I don't think I've ever seen that on a kind of a commercial synthesizer like this. I mean, you see it in some kind of more esoteric stuff. Well, I can't even think of anything that does that. But the fact that we can use the sort of DSP building blocks of oscillator 2 to feed oscillator 1 into and then continue to process it just explodes the amount of harmonics and the sonic characteristics massively. Yeah, okay, we're not using oscillator 2 then as a pitched thing, but as a processing block also, which I just think is really unique and very interesting, worth shouting about. Time for a little sonic interlude, I think. So let's just have a little bit more sound. In this one, I'm using the macros, which are very easily to assign. Shift, macro. There we go, yeah, there, and then we can just scroll down and assign, I don't know, let's go to the filter, why not, by a load, and then we're out, and then we've essentially got an additional parameter associated to that. Let's try a couple more. Some really... I mean, look at the low end on that. That is a monster. I just really wanted to show you that it's not all about kind of weird inner harmonic complex stuff. It also does some fairly straightforward sounds, but does them pretty well, I think. So let's see what else we've got. Again, using those macros, I really like that feature. Yeah, we heard some of these, I think, on the... when I did the kind of preview video, but we'll just go a bit further up. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff. SFX. Again, using that reverb to lovely effect. Very nice. So let's go now and take a look at the LFOs, because we've got two of them in here. In the original, we only had one, so let's just see what they do. Okay, so as we said, there are two LFOs. I'll just put a bit of... because essentially we got the waveform. Not quite up into audio rates, but still useful. Load of different preset waveforms. Syncable, obviously. Now you can set the trig to be retrig free. Poly keyboard, which... just take that down, you'll be able to hit. You can hear they're all cascading, so one per note, effectively. There's also mono keyboard trig, trig legato keyboard, retrig 1. So you just get, effectively, it could be like an envelope. LFO 1 retrigs LFO 2, retrig cycle, yeah. So there's lots of ways to route it. But the thing that's really interesting about this as well is if we go round through the waves, there's also, and I push load, preset shaper. So we can now preset, have these really interesting waves that would be, so let's try a rhythmic one. So that is now that shape. Got a bit of chorus on there. Interesting, but there's even more. So if we edit, we can actually now, if we start with LFO Shaper, we can actually switch these steps on and off. So we could just say, oh, let's just have that. So now we would have... it's triggering 2 of those, but if we wanted to change that, we'd add another one. But we can now edit these individual steps. So if I put another one in here, I'm using the pitch and the mod wheel to kind of create these different inversions. So now we've got the ability to just create these sort of really bonkers waveforms. I mean, it's a little bit fiddly, but I might benefit from an editor to get that really working, but interesting idea. And I suppose it's like a multi-stage modulator like we see on quite a lot of soft synths. In fact, I think we've probably something from Pigments perhaps that we haven't seen before. But it's really straightforward, so you just keep adding steps and, you know, setting the amplitude and the curve. Okay, so an example of this. Let's take a look at LFO1, which has got this kind of rhythmical shape, and LFO2 has just got this one. I've mapped LFO1 to the filter cutoff. So LFO1 is filter cutoff here, and also LFO2 is sending to 2 effects. So essentially, we're sending, I go here, we're going, so we can create some really interesting kind of, you know, I mean, the modulation stuff is kind of bonkers, and bearing in mind we can sync or set the sync relationship between those 2 LFOs to be all kinds of weird intervals, so we could get some really complex rhythmic modulation going on there. We've also got the cycling envelope, which is essentially the same as in the MicroFreak. We've got it here. If I bring this up, I've got a waveform sound here, wavefolder sound. I'm just going to add a bit of modulation, cycling envelope to 100 depth. So now, and I can set the curves of these preset. Now that's great, but also we've got a run mode, which essentially gives us an LFO style. And again, we can adjust the curves to go from linear to logarithmic through exponential. Let's just set that. That gives us a... We can get that fairly high into audio rates, and then we can make those curves even tighter. So it's sort of like a function generator, and there's 1 per voice on this as well, so that means that we can actually have similar cascading effects. When in run mode, which we've got here, it's actually global. But if we go into loop mode and we just bring these out a little bit, let's get the curves back up into the roughly 50%. So now I can put a bit of kind of quite interesting, but just by changing, because I've got the modulation routing, let's see if I just change that into 2-op, what happens to the sound there, because I've still got the same routing going on. Make that into an envelope. I've got another oscillator to bring in. Sort of CS-like, and that's just using the 2-op instead. So once we set these routings up and these kind of you know, the function generators and the cycling envelope, we can change the algorithms in the oscillator, and we can end up with a completely different tonal thing, but with the same sort of cadence to the modulation. It's really quite interesting. Just to show you, we've actually got 512 presets in here. We can go through them in filters, so pressing Shift and then turning the knob gets you to go through various different tags. We'll start with all, so I have this quite interesting patch here. Really curious. So we wonder what's going on there. Well, this I can tell you because there's a sound edit mode. So if we go into, there's very different parameters in here. So if we go into pitch, we can do oscillator modulation quantize, and you can see that that has been quantized to a minor pentatonic, which again is like, that's interesting. That's almost like an arpeggiator, and we haven't even got onto that yet. So a couple more sounds. Actually, let's do a filter. So what we'll do here is we'll go into filter, and let's see, let's go brass. See what's happening with brass. So here we go, here's a brass sound. Load that. Not especially brassy, super dude. That's a bit more brassy. Oh, 3. Well, there only seem to be 3 patches in all 512 that are tagged with brass. Actually, to be fair, we're probably up to around 256 that have already been programmed in here, and there are some really good ones. So while we're on the subject of presets, I can't help but feel that obviously to flip through all of these and then press go, it's a bit clunky. I would like to have seen some way of perhaps using these buttons in a certain mode just to be able to recall favourites. And that is not something that I think is possible, but it would be maybe a simple matter of having a shift, easily store maybe 16 favourites along here, and that would make getting through those presets a lot easier, maybe make it easier for performing live as well. Okay, effects, as I've said, are a big part of this, so let's take a quick look and see what we've got here. So I've got a nice sound, which is a combination of virtual analog and the bass oscillator, V analog bass. Now, we'll start with effect slot 1. We can have a number of different effects here. They're not all the same. We don't get delay and reverb in slot 1, but let's just switch chorus on. So you just select and then press go. So without, with. I've got that set up pretty deep, so that's dry wet. We've got the depth, we've got the speed, and then we've got a sub menu which will give us different kinds of chorus. So pretty nice, and we can actually modulate these via the mod matrix as we see fit. Right, turn that off. Let's go to mod slot 2, and we'll just have a look. This is defaulted to delay, which can be sync. Again, sub menu is digital, digital sync, stereo, stereo sync. We've got send level. We can set these to be insert points or send levels in the sound edit menu, which gives us access to a whole bunch of different sort of minutiae, delay routing, reverb routing, etc. So we can have send or insert. So there we go. Now let's just take that one off and come to reverb. Now again, we've got sub menus, default, long, so let's just go massive. We've got damping, and then again send. Really nice, sort of epic, not quite frozen, but you know, I mean, the sort of reverbs I quite like. Nice wide modulation. We can go short, we can modulate some of these things, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff in here as well. We take that off and we go back to effects 2, and then just have a listen. Distortion, there's some nice, what we could do is we turn the filter off, we can get the wet signal right up, but then take the gain. Just add some burn to it, or we can go, whoops, that's the one thing I keep doing actually, I keep forgetting. I wish this was color coded a bit different. So we can really go up high. And then we got a bit crusher. I had a patch earlier which that with the band pass filter sounds really nice. Then we got a 3-band EQ, which is just low, mid and high, peak EQ, multi-comp. So a whole bunch of effects. And multi-comp is like a compressor that gives us, kind of squashes the sound, but it does bring up the noise floor. And it can add a bit of extra distortion here. Kind of interesting, but you do hear that extra noise. But overall, great addition, and certainly takes the whole kind of Freak engine into another world. Like I said, it sort of reminds me a little bit more of the Polybrute effects, and again sort of brings it into that kind of Minilog XD where I take it, dare I say, I mean, because this does have certain similarities just in terms of the broad palette of sound and the way that the effects are integrated. Okay, let's take a look at the ARP. We'll start in a basic mode. So these are the modes here, and then these are sort of the modifiers. So we'll just put a straight. That's up. That's down. Up and down. Random. ARP order. Then we got a kind of chord mode. Wandering. Pattern. Then these frogs are the octave amounts, where we get a small frog, large frog, a larger frog, then at 4 octaves, an exploding frog. No idea why. We'll go down to 2. Whoops. Then we've got ARP repeat, which just repeats each note. Then we've got ratchet. Don't seem to be able to set the ratchet amount, it just sort of doubles it up. It would be nice if we could get into kind of 30 seconds or whatever. I couldn't find anything that allowed us to change that. Then we got a random. Then we got a mutate. Set the time division of the tempo just by pressing this button, same, and we can set the tempo here. Then we've also got a swing. Nice, I like it actually. It's got some really good performative aspects to it, and it's all on the front panel. But please, it would be so nice if while we're not in art mode, can we have these for favourites, please? Pretty please, because when they're not, they don't do anything, and they could do something. Okay, let's take a look at the sequencer. Go into sequence mode. First thing I'm going to do is actually erase the sequence, make sure there's nothing in there. So Shift, Erase. This is quite handy because we can erase various different parts of any preset, so the mod matrix and whatnot. So we'll get rid of the sequence. And now we're going to go into, I'm going to go into step mode. So I should be here, so step. It'll be polyphonic or monophonic, and by the way, we can set the sequence length to be up to 64. I'm going to make this just 16 for now, and we'll set the tempo. I think the tempo is, well, we'll see what happens. So I'm just going to do a kind of very simple. And that's all well and good. Step time record, no problem. I can also real time record, so I just go to play and activate record there. Obviously, polyphony withstanding. A couple of other things that we can do, we can actually press and hold a step and kind of edit the notes that we want on them just by doing that kind of stuff. It's pretty straightforward. So what will that sound like? I probably completely messed it up. Yeah. So what I want is that note and those two. So now I'm back to where I want to be. So quite easy to do. Now there's another thing that we can do here, which is obviously we can record modulation lanes. There are up to 4. So just pressing go. Go into record. So I've got those there, just stop there. And if I want to edit the step, I just press and hold here. Then I could basically take each one and just adjust accordingly. Kind of nice. A neat function in here is if we go into the sound edit menu, we can set in the sequencer, we can set the smoothing for that modulation to be on or off. So if we want steps, like real kind of hard edges, we can have that. Or if we want the smoothing, then we can do that. And that's on a per track basis. So that's kind of cool. Obviously, we can also not record any notes and just use those 4 lanes for sort of timed modulation matrix slots, which is also very handy and is something that I think any decent sequencer has to have these days. The Minifreak also comes with the Minifreak V, which is a plug-in version of the synth, so obviously fully digital. Now, I haven't got anything other than the beta. You can see it on the screen behind me, but we'll take a look around and see what it has to offer. So this is it in standalone mode. We've got an advanced mode as well, which kind of gives us more access to more controls. We've got the effects, which we could see here, the filter types, and the macro matrix, and also the LFO shaper, which is great because it means that it's much easier to create your custom LFO shapes. We've also got access to the sequencer, which makes things a little bit easier if you wanted to put in kind of dedicated patterns and whatnot. And a preset browser, which is the usual Arturia way. You do need a firmware update to link this up to the Minifreak V, but I guess once this is all out in the open, we're going to see everything we need to see in terms of downloads. The CPU level is down here. I'm getting kind of up to 20% on some of these, which seems quite high. I don't know whether it's fully optimized yet. So yes, there is full patch compatibility as far as I can tell. Like I said, I've only got a beta version, so I can't be completely sure. And I did manage to use it to name our patches for the Patreon downloads. But it does mean that you can use the software as a kind of librarian for the hardware and make patches on either and then interchange them between the two, which is actually pretty cool. So it's a nice touch to have, all the usual flavours, AAX, AU, VST, all of that good stuff. Sort of touch of the pigments about it with some of those constantly moving modulation displays. And I don't know whether they've got plans just to release it as a standalone software title or whether it'll be added to the V collection or something like that. I have no further information on it. So we're getting to that time, aren't we? What do I think about this synthesizer? I really like the sound of it. I think it's got a very wide breadth of sound. Perhaps where it's less strong is in just pure analog vibes. Where it's really good is in unusual, harmonically rich oscillator types and all that kind of additional processing. I really like the filters on it, I love the effects, and I think all the additional routing and stuff is handled really well. So if you're after a kind of compact polysynth, you know, in the Freak mold, because the Freaks do have a certain sound to them, then this is actually a pretty good deal. It's $559 UK, $599 US. Gosh, we're almost at parity with the dollar. That's terrifying. But you're getting 6 voices or 12 in paraphonic mode, and you're getting a lot of performance, effects, and just a really wide palette of sound. So that was the Arturia MiniFreak. Thank you very much for GPU Audio for supporting us on this video. You can find out more about them right here. And incidentally, if you want to check out any of the patches and then the additional video content, we'll be posting that on Patreon, and you can support us there. See you next time. Thanks for watching.